Hello, welcome back to the Three Orcs channel. This is David, and today we're going to talk about exploration in Dungeons and Dragons. Exploration has always been a pillar of Dungeons and Dragons. We all have been playing Dungeons and Dragons for over 40 years. For what started as a simple fantasy, adventure, dungeon exploration game, over the years, it turned into a full-fledged campaign system. Gygax created the initial Dungeons & Dragons box set published by TSR in 1974 and was the very first role-playing game, introducing concepts that have persisted throughout the later editions. The original Dungeons & Dragons box set introduced concepts which would become standard in later editions, including abilities, such as strength, intelligence, and dexterity, character classes, fighting man, magic user, cleric, and levels, races such as human, dwarf, elf, halfling, armor class, monsters and treasures, subterranean dungeons of halls, rooms, and doors replete with tricks and traps and magic items such as intelligent swords. The set also includes rules for wilderness travel by land and sea, hiring specialists and men-at-arms, building fortifications, and setting up baronies. Movement rates and areas are given in inches, like that of the miniature rules from which the system descended. The original D&D systems focused on rulings, not rules. That means when a player wants to try to perform an action, the DM would have to come up with a ruling, the chance of possible success. Gygax created these rules to allow the DM to run the game as he sees it. That it is not possible to create a rule for every situation imaginable. To try to do this is a failure, which would make the game less enjoyable, much like how D&D 3rd Edition and Pathfinder tried to do. Then, Gygax saw a need to standardize the game for convention play. As Gen Con has become ever more popular, the tournaments were the breeding grounds for new modules. The advanced Dungeons & Dragons rulebooks were his attempt to do so. The Dungeon Master's Guide, referred to as the Gygaxian Bible, has almost every table, chart, and rule imaginable for the DM to use at his table. At the same time, Basic Expert D&D did the same with its box set expansions through the 80s. The Dungeon Master Guide is aimed towards the DM. It is one of the best guides to running a role-playing game campaign ever written, with a wealth of advice. Beyond the fleshed-out rules, there's a lot of advice on simply managing the group and player expectations. This served to really explain in detail how the game was meant to work and how to deal with the various interpersonal issues that inevitably arise from running a game. These include how to host a game, how to handle troublesome players, how to integrate a new player into an existing group, when and who should roll dice in certain situations, and what to do if a player wants to play as a monster. Recently, in the last 5 years or so, WotC 5e talks about 3 pillars of D&D: exploration, role-playing, combat. Original D&D focused on all 3 pillars. Some modules more on combat than the other 2 pillars. 5e only supports role-playing, poorly with dice rolls, and combat, but it completely neglects the exploration pillar. It lacks the tools and frameworks for exploration, just providing a few rules like tracking or sleep. On the subject of player experience, 10 years is really a long time to learn something. They say it takes 4,000 hours to master a skill, like playing guitar, piano, or any trade skill. When you talk about something you did in the last 10 years at the age of 40, that is some good investment of time getting to know something. But if someone spent our young, formidable years in grade school, then high school into college, 10 years is a really long time. Most D&D players spent their youth playing basic and advanced Dungeons & Dragons. We all read every Dragon magazine and played in countless groups. That is a considerable amount of time to do anything. But for millions of D&D players, not only have we played for 10 years or more or less of our young lives, but in the last 40 years playing Dungeons & Dragons. Then some company like WotC bought our game from TSR and completely recreated the game and called it Dungeons & Dragons. In the last 5 years or more, a wave of new young players started playing the game. This game caters to them. These later editions of the game gradually moved away from exploring towards a bland conveyor belt of combat. It has shifted the core foundations and the nature of the game. The game took on a responsibility for producing encounters which the character could face with a set level of danger. 5e calls this challenge rating. The players no longer had to worry about making sure they were not walking into a death trap. Instead, death traps were made illegal. For those of you who are not lucky enough to grow up in the 80s with Dungeons & Dragons, I highly recommend reading the old school primer by Matthew Finch, or Principia, Apocrypha by Ben Milton, Stephen Lumpkin, and David Perry. These give a great overview of how different something like OSE feels from modern games like WotC 5e. So, what is exploration? We all know that the original Dungeons & Dragons game had exploration in spades. The game mostly focused on that. If you think about exploration, about those strange and unique places, these things that would engage the player and bring the campaign world to life because the player is curious. Anytime you are engaging the player's sense of discovery, you are technically engaging with that pillar of exploration. Exploration is supposed to be part of the core experience of most fantasy adventure RPGs. The design of the game strongly suggests exploration is supposed to be part of the game. You can look at it this way. Exploration is everything that is not combat and role-playing. Exploration is not just locations, but the story, the quest, the adventure itself, everything in the game to discover. You could say that exploration is a game mechanic, an activity, just like role-playing and combat, but it is more than that. The rules for Dungeons & Dragons is a collection of rules, charts, stat blocks, world, and adventure content. It is expected for the DM to weave all this together into this grand adventure and campaign world. Discovery helps make the game move forward. Basic D&D, old school essentials, and advanced Dungeons & Dragons do provide mechanics for dungeon and wilderness exploration. Some brief description on how you are expected to use all this information. But it takes years of experience as a DM to do all this really well. The question should be, why is exploration in most tabletop role-playing games don't feel like exploration? DMs who want to have exploration in their game and then realize none of it actually feels like exploration. Even in the player's handbook for WotC 5e and Pathfinder 2 mention exploration, but something is still missing. Exploration in the game just doesn't feel like you're exploring. Newer players seldom actually do any exploration. The fact is, exploration is driven by personal curiosity. What makes exploration is that the player decided to satisfy their curiosity. Something in the game world caught their interest. The player has a question. Exploration is a satisfaction of personal curiosity. Of course, players have different reasons to be curious about something. These reasons will vary from player to player. Some players are curious about immersive game world. Some players are driven by becoming more powerful or overcoming challenges. It comes down to the fact that exploration is an assertion of agency. Explanation emerges when player curiosity leads them to move around and investigate a location. Exploration happens when you say, "Hey, let's go check out that cave." I walk over to that building to see what's there. I sneak down that hallway to see what is around the corner. Exploration is a series of choices. Exploration is a satisfaction of curiosity by their own initiative and activities that require interacting with the environment. What is not exploring, you may ask? The player walks into the bedroom and finds a ring by making a wisdom, perception, or intelligent investigation check. With original D&D, the players must describe how and what they are looking for. The only time a DM should ask a player to make a skill attribute check when there is a significant chance of failure or it's a success failure. That action plays a part in the storytelling aspect of the game, and an attribute check resolves that action. In other words, when there's no chance of failure in taking an action, or when the action's success or failure has little or no impact on the game, an attribute check is not required. Basically, the player describes their action, what they're doing, what they're looking for, then the Dungeon Master responds with the results. If the player did not look into the back of the fireplace, they're just not going to find it. The player has to describe to the Dungeon Master exactly what they're doing and what they're searching and where they're searching. This is not a video game where you press a button to enact that skill. This is a role-playing game where you describe your actions and the Dungeon Master responds with the results. What is the best way to handle this? DMs should provide options. Often, the style of campaign can offer many options. Some would call it an open world or a sandbox game, to give the players the freedom of choice and the sense that their choice matters. A DM must give players sufficient information to make an informed decision. Give your players freedom and engaging the world sprinkled with secrets and plot hooks. Exploration happens naturally. All important and interesting elements should be mentioned when describing the scene. If the players feel they don't have the complete picture and need to ask for more information, this will waste game time and add frustration at the table. A good DM will entice players to weigh risk and cost to make a choice. An example of dungeon and wilderness exploration, the players will need to weigh the following risk-reward. Player resources can be a consideration: healing, spells and bandages, supplies like torches and oil. Encumbrance, how much gear and treasure are you carrying? Is that affecting your movement rate? Spells, have you used up all your spells for the day? Wandering monsters, they can reduce the player's resources, making the adventure much more dangerous. Adventure timeline, how long does the players have to finish that quest or to rescue that person or find that object? Spending too much time healing or getting resupplies could affect the outcome of the campaign. There's lots of ways to make exploration the highlight of a Dungeons & Dragons campaign instead of an afterthought. I can provide you 3 excellent examples of exploration that can be found in the famous Gygax modules. The T1, the Village of Hamlet, and the Moat House. The Village of Hamlet is a fully key developed small town with businesses and an inn and a church and a castle with fully developed NPCs and plots for the campaign. The players can walk around and explore the buildings, the NPCs of the area, and ask questions to find out more information about the campaign. Also, trying to find the moat house in the first place. When you start the campaign, you don't know where that moat house is. And so you have to find clues by questioning NPCs in the village where to find the moat house and find out what's behind the bandit raids in the area. The same thing applies to the B2 module, Keep on the Borderlands, to find the Caves of Chaos. When the players first arrive at the keep, they have no idea where the Caves of Chaos are located at. They really don't know it's a source of problems in the area until they get to the keep and they start talking to all the NPCs in the keep. The keep is fully detailed with all the NPCs and businesses there. They talk to the NPCs in the keep to find rumors and information about what's been happening in the area, where the dangers lie, and where to find the source of this problem, which is the Caves of Chaos. Also, these 2 modules have keyed encounter areas outside of the dungeon, outside of the village. If the players decide to explore the countryside, they're going to find other layers, other encounters. In a good campaign, these other locations and encounters have something to do with the storyline that moves the plot along. Also new to D&D World is Old School Essentials and their modules. For example, The Hole in the Oak and Incandescent Grottos. Those are excellent adventure exploration dungeons. They are the traditional old school exploration dungeons that we all played back when we were kids, where you actually go into this dungeon and fully explore it, looking for secret doors, treasure, unique rooms, finding traps, unique monsters, and survival. Those modules are a perfect example of what exploration should be in a dungeon. If you're looking for inspiration how to add exploration to a dungeon, I highly recommend those 2 modules. There's also ways to add exploration to a story or role-playing scenes. 1, introduce a plot or an adventure hook. 2, the player's arcane and religion knowledge to provide them information. The player's history might have something to do with the campaign plot. Or the wizard in the group has arcane knowledge and he has some information that would prove valuable to the success of this adventure. Same thing with a cleric or a paladin. Their religion knowledge will provide information. For a more concise list, there is a way to add exploration to your campaign world. I recommend creation of a curtailed list that's part of the campaign narrative. Meaningful events and locations where the players can make choices. Encounters that provide information and move the story forward in some way. 1. Add urgency. A ticking clock. A time limit to get somewhere or to solve something. A timeline when an event will happen. Examples can be destroy the Death Star before it gets into range. Destroy the one true ring before Sauron gets his hands on it. In the B2 module, Keep on the Borderlands, an undead army is being raised to march on the keep. Or the water level is rising rapidly in a dungeon, or poisonous gas is filling the dungeon. The porticus is lowering. A giant boulder is rumbling down the tunnel. These are all excellent examples. 2. Wandering monster charge. Encounters derived from forces in the area that have something to do with what is going on, like bandits or humanoids working for the evil organization in the adventure. Monsters in league with the bad guys. Monsters upset or angry because of the players or the bad guys. Normal world engaging traffic, like merchants or NPCs passing through the area. These could be great source of rumors and assistants and possible henchmen or retainers. 3. One-page encounter locations. It's highly recommended that you create or find a list of encounter locations for your adventure. This will add a sense of exploration to your game, like town or city or wilderness locations. Like the T1 through 4 Temple of Elemental Evil module, Gygax specifically stated that there are more temple outposts out there other than the Moat House. That means the Fire, Earth, Water, and Air cults have their own outpost out in the area as well, and the DM could fully flush those out and add them to the campaign to give the player something to explore and to discover. Number 4, create or use one-page dungeons, like a location to some ruins, or a lonely tower, or a farm with a helpful NPC, or a druid's grove. All of them could come in handy into keeping the narrative going, the story flowing, to give information of value to the players. 5, create a few dozen NPCs. While in town or on the road, the party should encounter NPCs that add flavor and bring the world to life, also to help move the story along and provide rumors and clues. 6, create a notice board located in town or a tavern providing rumors and clues. 7, create a list of rumors. Have a large categorized list of rumors to draw from for any NPC the players decide to talk to. That is great advice to bring a campaign to life and make it seem more real. When you have a list of rumors that every NPC would know, that the Dungeon Master could immediately draw from and convey to the players. And these rumors are directly linked to the storyline to move it forward. I hope these examples help the DM focus more on exploration in their D&D campaigns. True, original D&D always had this information, but I think this advice is very useful to any DM running a newer edition of the game. If you like what you see here and want to support me further, please go to my 3 Orcs Patreon page. Every person that supports me encourages me to make more videos like this.
Did you enjoy video? Consider tossing support on my Patreon. It's best way to support orcs. If you would like to see more content, subscribe and post comments below. It better not be bad.
Thank you for watching. I hope this information on how to add exploration into your D&D campaign makes your game much more enjoyable for your players.